This is the Venerable Chogyam Trungpo Rinpoche. Seminar entitled Meditation in the Three Yanas, held in Boulder, Colorado. This is talk number 7, July 5th, 1979. This is an ARP digital remaster made November 2007.
Mahayana, which literally means big thinking, the greater vehicle. And the previous talk by the regent has already opened that particular yana. So I am continuing that way with the idea of a greater vehicle. But however, that it is also important for us to realize that the Hinayana, or the lesser vehicle, is not undermined at all. It has been said in the scriptures that having discipline of shamatha is having a good atmosphere, and having discipline of vipassana is burning a candle in that particular discipline, in midst of that particular discipline, so that that particular candle is not blown by the wind. So we have a steadiness, and then we have a luminosity, we have a light, prajna, an awareness, mindfulness of discriminating possibilities of seeing where things as they are. Our thought patterns, basic neurosis, and everything's been appreciated, looked at, and by means of practice meditation, it's being dealt with. The shamatha discipline cuts through the subconscious gossip, and the vipassana discipline cuts through the basic neurosis. In conjunction with the Mahayana practice further, that cuts through the basic neurosis moreover, so that seems to be the general layout. So that's why I want you to realize that we cannot practice Mahayana Buddhism without of Hinayana, of a basic narrow path. When we have the notion of a narrow path, then that notion of a narrow path begin to allow ourselves to be expanding ourselves to the greater vision of the Mahayana ideal altogether. We did talk a little bit about basic goodness in the Mahayana section of our study. But I would like to discuss further tonight the notion of basic goodness. At this point is related to the idea of intrinsic goodness, that we as human beings, as sentient beings, do possess an ultimate goodness in ourselves. Even if we may be cats or dogs or snakes, worms. But still, we do possess fundamental goodness, which is quite different than the notion of hope. Hopefully, we have goodness, which is quite a different idea. But in this case, we are good, we have goodness already, we are in it, midst of it, and we have the possibilities of improving that by trotting on the path of the Dharma altogether. And that basic goodness is often known by a lot of terminologies in the Buddhist tradition. As you know, there is what's known as the Buddha nature, the seed of enlightenment, Buddha nature. along with that, there's what's called enlightened gene, which everybody possesses. Enlightened gene. Nothing to do with the physical gene, but psychological enlightened gene, Buddha gene. And the notion of a gene is, as you know, that you might try to raise a lion cub, and they're trying to bring up that lion cub with a vegetarian diet. But sooner or later, when that lion begins to pick up on its gene of lioness of it, and will never buy your vegetarian diet and won't eat meat. Similarly, that what we are talking about is that we might be confused in the samsaric, unenlightened world altogether, but when the students begin to practice shamatha vipassana and begin to wake themselves up, they begin to catch themselves in a enlightened gene. So they begin to perk up, begin to wake themselves up sooner or later, enlightened gene, which is somewhat based on idea of that of the Buddha nature. And then we have the more path-oriented concept of gene, which is in the Mahayana tradition, is called Bodhicitta. Bodhi meaning wake, citta meaning heart, enlightened heart, coming out of the gene concept. And that's more path-oriented, that when a person is committed themselves as refugee to begin with of the Hinayana notion of taking refuge and surrendering oneself altogether. And then second stage is a person begin to learn to love themselves. Put it very crudely, very simply. By the way, in the Buddhist theology, so to speak, we don't have a word for love as we have in the Western term, but love in this case meaning affection, absence of aggression. Which falls two stages, as you have heard from the Regent's talk the other night, that first one is idea of learn to love themselves, which is expression of enlightened gene, or Bodhicitta concept. And when person is learn to love themselves, they begin to realize there's no need for holding grudge against the rest of the world at all. So in turn, the person learns to love the rest of the world, which is a second stage of development of warmth, love. And the traditional approach and terminology is that the first stage of loving themselves, called Maitri, which means gentleness. And the second stage of process is called Karuna, which means greater affection, compassion, affectionate warmth to your world. Such things exemplified in the terms of the practicing style of the Mahayana tradition is, which might be somewhat archaic in presenting this, but however the scripture says that you choose in your life first person you will love. You have affection, some sense of gratification, and that is one's own mother, who nursed you babysat for you for years and years, and who fed you, who wiped out your shit, and who put you in a bed and burped, and took care of you, even in the early days, until whatever the social situation might be as you grow up. Well, in this particular society of the Western world, a lot of people don't feel something like that to their mothers. They often hate them. But however, that if you use the medieval or the Tibetan analogy, you have some idea what we are talking about. It's somebody who actually took care of you and who didn't mind your mess. And you vomited on your mother, shat on your mother, pissed on your mother. Still, she wouldn't put you into the garbage pail, which some people did. On the other hand, even that's questionable too. Some people put their children to incinerator, garbage chute. But however, the ideal mother situation is you're not supposed to do that. And they took care of you. So get some basic analogies out of that. The affection and love, that how your mother took care of you. Good mother. And quite possibly more ethnic-oriented mother approach. Jewish mother, Italian mother, for instance. Such care and warmth as it took and exercised to you as your child, and thankfulness of that, and not only thankfulness of that, because of that we can actually expand our own vision, how we should feel, in realizing that the process of rebirth has been trillions of years all along. That we figured it out that everybody has been once in the shift of our mother all along to each other. So everybody's here sitting with you, your own mothers in turn, in trillions of years as we went on, our rebirth and further rebirth process situation. And appreciating such situation of gentleness and kindness, we could feel that way to others, everybody. Which is a development of Maitri, gentleness, appreciation. That appreciation also expands further in this lifetime to enemies, people you don't like. The Mahayana vision at all is basically idea of that you can beautify this world and you can make this world beautiful world. Why? To begin with, because you like yourselves as well. And therefore you can expand that vision. You like your mother, ideally, and you like the rest of the world that way. And traditional training of establishing what's known as relative bodhicitta is exercising and familiarizing oneself that way, so that we can love ourselves, not in the sense of ego-centered world, but in the sense of that we appreciate ourselves, that we don't have a self-destructiveness involved in ourselves. We have some appreciation of ourselves to begin with, of basic goodness and the basic enlightened virtue, the enlightened gene, what you call it, whatever. And in turn, we appreciate others because of examples of how our mother treats ourselves. So that way, we can treat the rest of the world that way altogether, which makes the very interesting differences of level 90 of the hippie decay of the past centuries or so we have gone through. Different. In this case, there is a logical process, starting with oneself, then project ourselves to the rest of the world that way, which does bring what's known as relative bodhicitta. The reason why it is known as a relative bodhicitta is because there's first idea of why should we love our world. And second stage goes beyond that, is what's known as absolute bodhicitta, which is a product of one's sitting practice meditation. Of shamatha, vipassana discipline brings us a sense of balanced mind, balanced state of being, because we are not immune too much into or prone too much into subconscious gossip and frivolity in our state of mind. We learn how to hold still because of working with our breath, our postures, and a general awareness altogether. With that particular notion, also we have something else, which is a sense of absence of ego. That is to say, there is a notion of although it is a basic goodness we talked about, but at the same time, there is nothing we can hold on to. Nothing is particularly tangible. And because of its intangibility, therefore we find we could provide our own space for ourselves. And that is precisely the reason why we are so good. The basic goodness comes out of that. In the Buddhist concept, tradition, or understanding as well, is overcome the notion of ego, develop the notion of egolessness, overcome the notion of ego altogether, which is not particularly regarded as a practice, but it is regarded as a discovery, that you discovered that you didn't have an ego. And the reason why you discovered that you don't have ego is because you thought you did have ego. But when you look into it, and where is it? And you couldn't find one. Everything's collective situations of skandhas, which are form, feeling, emotions, impulse, and consciousness, all the rest of it, which are just collections of things, but we can't really put our finger on it, and that we find there is no real substance in ourselves, which are the theism people have been so frightened of. And they have tried in hundreds of thousands of ways to covering up in all sorts of ways, and sometimes they call it, if you feel there's non-existence, it's the birth of the original sin. Because if there's a basic annihilation, they felt that you can't connect with the gentleman upstairs. And then even the question is whether the gentleman upstairs does exist or not is also under the question that way as well. And discovery of the psychology world, the latest ones or the early ones, people talk about building up the ego so that you have a drive. And all of those situations are trying to build up. There's tremendous fear involved because of that they might find there's a gap somewhere. The basic hollowness somewhere. And they don't want to hear about that at all, which seem to be the root of all the complaints to the Buddhist teachings that exist in this country as well as the rest of the theistic world altogether. They're almost trying to tell the Buddhists, don't say it. Shh. Don't say it. And Buddhists decide to say it. So then they try to sue us that we said it. That there's a hollowness, there's nothing beyond the whole thing. They're so shocked, they will be so panicked, particularly when students begin to realize and begin to work on non-existence, real existence, as such as you and I. The panic, incredible panic, they will try anything to pin us down, to say that somebody's telling a lie. Who said that? I never heard there's no such thing as egolessness. I never heard such thing. What's that? That kind of panic is becoming very popular, in fact. And paranoid situation that who could dare say such a thing is there's no basic core. Obviously, at that point, such people have already overlooked the notion of a basic goodness still exists, not with the ego, but just because of his egolessness of it, because of its the absolute Bodhicitta principle already, which contains gentleness, compassion already. The practice of this is a very simple one that we have developed, we've been practicing for a long time. As long as we heard the Dharma, particularly I could speak for my own country, Tibet, we've been practicing since the 10th century. And it worked and it made sense to all of us. And you can't say that since the 10th century to the 20th century, everybody was an idiot. There had been a lot of intelligent people who practiced, maybe lots of idiots practiced as well, but everything made sense. And we are still going to take pride in that, obviously, and we are going to present to you as well, to share what we have done, we have achieved, we understood already. That's called the idea of exchanging oneself to other. That's particular practice. And there is a Tibetan word for that which is called Tonglen, which spells Tonglen, Tonglen. Tong meaning letting go, Len meaning receiving. That's been practiced for a long time to experience that you could give away your goodness to others, and in turn you could retrieve or inhale the wicked or the bad neurosis to yourself. So the idea has been finally fully, at last, that you become a completely selfless person, that you don't work for your own benefit, but you become the best of the idea for voluntary, of sacrifice, of that kind of concept. And then we have a slogan which comes from the text that you should be reading. If you haven't read, you should be reading that text, reading material that we have put out. And it is the translation by Jamgon Kongtrul, who was the original Jamgon Kongtrul of my teacher. And it is called, what's called a direct path to enlightenment, translated by That's right, yes. The slogan for this particular thing is, what it says in the text is, giving and taking should be practiced alternately, full stop. That alternation should be put on the medium of the breath. Which is realizing the student already have the particular version of sending and the taking of your breath. Breathing goes out and comes in. Shamatha Vipassana technique. And this particular practice is, as you breathe out, you send out goodness in you. Any healthy situations, any goodness exists in you to share it with the world. And as you breathe in their negativities, neurosis and sickness, diseases, anything, take upon yourself. So that's the general idea of actual practice itself. But beyond that, there's a basic philosophical, so to speak, concept is that the biggest twist we have ever developed in the entire samsaric foundation altogether in this world is that we always want to do the opposite. We want to draw in goodness from somebody. We want to just push our garbage out, throw in the garbage, and create a pollution. So this idea is being completely the reverse. That if there's any garbage, let us digest and eat it and process so that in turn it could be goodness projecting out altogether in any case, which is a great switcheroo. All along we've been doing the opposite. As soon as we exist as basic being, basic person, we never want to do that. We never want to give our goodness away. We always cherish and hold it. We have it. You don't want to give away that. And you ward off. Anything comes to you. Or you put your fence in your garden. Ward off the bypasses from the street. And you have even refrigerators so that you don't want to bring in any bad vibes to your food. So your meals, your food will be kept clean and crisp and cold, frozen in your refrigerator so you can eat healthy. Every measure that we usually take in our world is to ward off bad all the time. Even we don't want to use leftovers, because in case in intermediate situations that your food has got infected by some strange reasons of bad air, got rotten, you throw them away. You don't even feed your dogs with it or your cats with it, and you just throw them in the garbage. And if you're wealthy enough or convenient enough, you don't wear your shirt twice. You wear it one day and the next day you throw away, send to the laundry or dry cleaning. The society and the world has developed such idea for completely against sending and attacking notion of such things like that. And we are not really willing to accept anything or willing to give anything at all. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very shocking. It's become a cult of its own. The concept of how to keep it clean is completely perverted. We are not willing to bring anything in. When I flew back from Mexico, there was a federal requirement of procedures, and before we land on American soil, is that the airlines have to have this spray. And they apologized for us. They said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to spray for you. And there's these spray going back and forth in the aisles of the airplane, that in case that we bring back any Mexican germs. But the airline people took with some sense of humor. But I think they basically apologized for that. And they had to meet the legal commitment, such things like that. Apparently, otherwise, that the airplanes not allowed to land on this soil. Sending and taking is a very interesting concept. At this point, it's actually cultural interest as well as social interest, and also enlightened concept interest. And it has a lot of bearings on the whole thing, like that. If you'd like to have discussions on that, please welcome.
Rinpoche, do you recommend that we actually do this sending and taking practice?
Yes, I think we have some procedures to that, to the fact that maybe you could discuss with your group leaders. Is that traditional what we do is informal sitting practice situations. You do 10 minutes of sending and taking, and then you switch into shamatha vipassana.
So it's something that could be practiced every day then?
Yes, very much so. And also, there are more slogans to come, and which would be available for you. We're going to put out slogans for you from this particular training the mind text, which is very helpful. And we could do that as well.
Thank you.
Rinpoche, there's something that I don't understand, and it's, I guess, basically it has to do with distortion.
With what?
Distortion of the practice of mindfulness and awareness. You say that that there's no ego, and somehow it seems like that practice can actually become ego's territory.
Oh, you mean mindfulness?
Yeah, mindfulness and awareness.
Well, I suppose it could. But on the other hand, if you just be mindful, and not necessarily that you're trying to looking for any kind of warning system that you should be careful, but just be mindful on the spot, which is unconditional mindful concept we talked about already anyway. And there's no substance behind that. You just be mindful on the spot, which is sort of shallow, but very bright, very luminous.
Is the distortion when a judgment is placed on that?
Distortion is that if you're trying to say that if you're mindful, then I'm going to get something out of that, which we don't have to do. Just have mindfulness happening on the spot. That's it. That's your genuine world. No consequences. And you're not trying to build any credit out of that.
Well, what happens when you get involved in the practice of mindfulness and awareness? It seems like some sort of difficulty is there because there's someone practicing.
That's
and
all right.
letting go of that someone.
Well, that's your idea, but there's nobody practicing maybe behind the whole thing. You just have a mindfulness person doing the whole thing. It doesn't matter who's doing it, who's not doing it, really. Actually, that doesn't exist, to your surprise. You just do your mindfulness. That's you are. That's it. And other things are just purely case history, which doesn't mean very much, particularly.
Well,
Go on.
it seems like there's a real hindrance in the attachment to that mindfulness and that awareness.
Should you be?
I'm sorry?
Should you have? Should you have attachment to your mindfulness?
No.
Well, otherwise it turns out to be a not mindfulness. It will become a self-consciousness.
How does one work with that self-consciousness?
Just look at mindful situation on the spot, disown. No credentials involved. So what? Right? And with a sense of humor.
Thank you.
And the self-consciousness comes with some sense of grief, pain, and nervousness. You don't need that. It's touching the ripples in the pond. Happens very light and free and magnificent, without making a big deal of it. And very humorous because of that. It's good to do. You probably like it if you do it properly. It's quite a nice thing to do.
Rinpoche, what is the difference between bodhicitta and enlightened genes or Tathagata in terms of practice?
In terms of practice, well, in terms of practice, I think maybe the Bodhicitta is more workable. It's because it is a seed, at the same time it is a project that you develop either the absolute or relative bodhicitta in you, so you carry out your projects that way. That seems to be the basic idea.
Can you experience Tathagatagarbha?
By action, purely by action, acting out, dealing with yourself, Maitri, and working with others with the Karuna, you can only experience that you have a guts at the same time, which is bodhicitta.
So the experience of bodhicitta and the experience of Tathagatagarbha are the same thing?
I think so, very much so. The Tathagatagarbha is a concept of genes, right? Which means that you can do it. You have a basic inclination of how to conduct yourself. Reason why how you had it all together at all, that you relate with it, be nice to somebody. You are capable of falling in love, or you're capable of being nice to somebody, or you're capable of raising your children, be gentle to them. That's the basic logic, which is the enlightened gene concept, which goes with the Buddha nature, Tathagatagarbha.
So then when you experience bodhicitta, it's the inspiration to actually do
Inspiration, yeah, you take actually a vow, when you take a bodhisattva vow, you commit yourself to that particular direction, which is more path-oriented. That you are inspired because of your relative bodhicitta, therefore you begin to experience absolute bodhicitta because of that, which is a journey concept.
One more question with that. Then is Tathagatagarbha a bit like absolute bodhicitta in that sense?
Mm-hmm.
But that Tathagatagarbha or enlightened genes are always there, but bodhicitta actually happens. You experience
It happens because it makes you breakthrough.
So that's why you actually
That's
begin
right.
to do it.
That's right.
Okay, thank
That's
you very
right.
much.
Yeah. That's actually a very complicated logic. We always had this in the seminary. And we have it when you come next time in the seminary. We have the same discussions on the whole thing. But actually it works that way. When you take a bodhisattva vow, then that is the moment when you transplant bodhicitta in you. Which means that transplanting bodhicitta in you, meaning you are going to act out like bodhisattva-like approach. So that's much more pragmatic, because it is based on the idea of enlightened gene and Tathagatagarbha.
In line with all that, you mentioned that basic goodness was connected with absolute bodhicitta. Could you explain that?
Well, it is. Absolute bodhicitta meaning that fundamentally you are capable of doing what you do, acting out in bodhisattva-like situations, developing compassion and loving kindness to yourself, acting out, carrying out the paramitas, which we discuss in the next section. And Tathagatagarbha is that because you do possess enlightened gene already, so you can't miss it.
So you're saying that basic goodness and Tathagatagarbha are the same thing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Gene. You can say basic goodness, gene.
Rinpoche, I find when the three marks of existence become very vivid, lots of aggression towards that arises. I was wondering if you could say something about how you work with that aggression.
Aggression with what?
Aggression towards the fact that nothing's permanent and,
Yeah.
and that you don't exist and there's nothing to get and on and on.
I think your guess is as good as mine, sweetheart.
Pardon?
Your guess is as good as mine. I think that's a very basic thing. You should work with it. I shouldn't be telling you how to get out of that logic and make the whole thing solid logic, which will be destructive. And it should grow onto you. You should just permeate like fungus. The fungus of the 3 marks of existence. And that makes a good Buddhist. Once you begin to feel disturbed by it, which is good, that's what we call it, level of, you begin to hear. And then once we're disturbed by that particular message, then you begin to look into further, we call it level of listening. And that makes a completely Hinayanist discipline. And beyond that, you begin to work with it and how to cultivate the whole thing, which begin to get involved in the Mahayana vision of enlightened society as well. So I shouldn't say too much. It would be destructive. If I spell out the whole thing, it would be a bad joke. And you should study yourself. I'm sure you can do it.
Thank you.
And keep your fearlessness, warriorship. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have to close this point. Thank you for raising your hands, but still we have to let you have a good sleep so you can study and practice tomorrow morning again. And don't drink too much tonight. I would like to say a few words on the idea of a fundraising situation that we discussed early on. To begin with, the whole idea is very simple. As you know, that we need money in order to run the facilities of Naropa Institute, which is very basic and very ordinary and extraordinarily simple. But there are some side issues and hangovers by a lot of students and maybe the members of the faculties as well here, that money is regarded as ugly, bad job, bad thing, tremendous demand. Looking back at why money is to be made, why we make money, one of us make money. And usually we work and then therefore we be paid by dollars. $3 now, $2 now, whatever. It's a sign of effort. Otherwise we can't earn any money. You have to do something in order to earn your dollar, which is a very basic, ordinary language, very simple. And precisely the same way, the Naropa Institute needs more money, is we have to work that way. We have to take advantage of the work that has happened in earning dollars by maybe your rich parents and your rich friends who had worked. And maybe you're talking about in the regional American foundation of this democratic USA, people cultivated the soils and they killed a lot of Indians. And they confiscated a lot of land from the Indians. I'm sorry. And we grew corn, we built railroad, we worked with the trappings of collecting, what you call those animals, beavers. And everybody had worked somewhere or other. And the original American dollar came out of that. Out of that whole collections of things, confiscating land from the Indians and beaver huntings and the buffalo huntings, they're making hide and meat and railroads, everything we see always in the Western movies. Well, that's one level of a money situation that we have, which is quite colorful if you look back with the humor. But on the other hand, it's terribly depressing that how Americans come up with a dollar, which is actually Spanish term, isn't it? Dollar is Spanish term. Dollar. Yeah. So I don't know what the whole thing comes out. As far as the Naropa Institute goes, we need more dollar. As Dr. Hayward expressed out, we are not embarrassed, particularly at all, of the money. When we see lots of money, we think more vision. We have more feelings of shamatha vipassana possibilities. Each time when you see dollars coming to our bank account, we can practice that much more. And that's the actual vision we have. That's really true. We are not regarding the Naropa Institute as a merchandise at all. Fortunately. And maybe that's our problem, and we should be good business people, but we never done that. Maybe the Brandeis of the Boston are better business people who can exchange the wisdom into merchandise with the Jewish tradition. But unfortunately, we are not that up-to-date or aggressive at all. We as Naropa Institute never regard our wisdom as merchandise. Maybe that is the problem. Maybe we should have a bid of some kind and auctions of our wisdom. Who has the best wisdom, who goes higher, and so forth. But that will degrade our intention altogether at all. Today I was driving to my office from my house, Kalapa Court, and it suddenly dawned on everybody's merchandise people. Everybody's merchants that either they have something to sell or something to earn. Their money, and everybody's merchants, which is a somewhat sad prospect that entire country lives on mercenary philosophy. There's no real living philosophy beyond merchandise situations at all, which is very upsetting, and it feels, I personally suddenly feel myself, what am I doing in this midst of hundreds of thousands of mercenaries, driving myself down, watching them, earning every hour. Either they're coming out of their stores, or they're going to buy something out of it. The whole thing is very strange, and upsetting, and degrading in some sense, that what become of us in this world, that everybody's mercenaries. I think it's terrible. As far as the Naropa Institute is concerned, we would like to get out of this mercenary approach, that our wisdom of intellect and intuition meeting together is not merchandise project. It is not for sale. It is not for auction at all. Absolutely not. But with that, in order to save ourselves from merchandise process. We have to raise funds, which is a basic idea that the students can relate with that wisdom we have is not a business proposition. And we can actually relate the whole thing as respecting to the real world, proper world, the world that respects with each other. Student-teacher connection altogether, and no business proposition. And what we have to teach is not merchandise situation altogether. So, the reason why we actually have to raise a fund at this level is because we want to preserve, free ourselves entirely from the merchandise concept that Naropa Institute has something to sell. If you want to buy it, we got to sell cheap or expensive. That's disgraceful. And in order to save from that particular concept, I think you have to join us more that way. So at least there will be a little island in the rest of the merchandise world that we have some little place where the wisdom is not sold and bought that way. And the wisdom is expected, respected. And you can join in as well as student, as well as teachers, faculty members, what have you here. So that is a very basic point, and I mean it. And I think it's very important for us to fight back the mercenary world, which is somewhat very degrading altogether. Sometimes I feel funny about designing elegant billboards or the posts of certain particular programs, and I begin to feel, is this connected with idea of salesmanship, or we are actually demonstrating what we have to tell, what we have to perform? And I always usually try to stay away from the mercenary world altogether, which is becoming very heavy and terrible. And buying, selling, and charging for a particular hours. When somebody says a word of wisdom, that will cost $80,000. When somebody doesn't say a word of wisdom, that costs $2. It's very absurd, it's very sad. So we are trying to save ourselves from that kind of a concept, that our presentation could be free from that mercenary approach. And that is our endeavor. So I hope you will help us that way. And I'm sure you understand what I mean. And if you don't,